Hello and welcome to episode 234 of the Paint or the Minis podcast. We put the show together so you can have something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your desk and tickling your plastic, resin or metal figures of any scale, genre or game. Models made out of anything else? Metal, resin and plastic? Is there anything else models are made out of? Air-dried putty? Maybe? Your own things that come out of your body. Does anyone sculpt any images of things that come out of their own body? I know that there's certain artists that paint with their own bodily excretions. Is someone molding and making minis out of stuff that comes out of their own body? I don't know. But anyway, our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with people who are involved in our hobby at any level, from top to bottom, that links in with what I just said, because we've all got our own stories and each of them are unique and different. So if you know a sculptor that's sculpting stuff with some non-traditional elements, then let me know. We believe that these genuine and organically, that links in with what I said before as well. These genuine and organically occurring chats offer a different and possibly deeper insight into the guests that we have. Sit at your hobby desk, paint your models, listen to the chat. We really do hope that you enjoy the content. This week I speak to Vampz and we talk about how much things cost. A while ago I started to revisit the idea of value in our hobby. This is something that's really close to my heart and something that I've written articles about on the Paint or the Muse website, and also we have at least 5 episodes dedicated to this subject in one way, shape or form. You may remember the sustainable gaming chats that we had around episode 150. It was a group of 3 episodes that we had about how we may choose, or decide to hobby and play and game sustainably. If you haven't listened to those episodes, go back to episode 150 or so, have a little bit of a poke around and you'll get the idea of what we were talking about. So I wanted to revisit this idea and this subject in 2025, and as I was doing my research, I checked out a video by Count Vampz Painting and Wargaming YouTube channel, where he had plotted out the different off-the-shelf prices of getting involved in various different tabletop war games and their comparative costs. So it's really important to note a couple of things here. One, when we are talking in this episode, and if you are listening to that video, he's talking about the off-the-shelf prices buying online. Also, when we talk about this stuff, I mention it quite a few times in the show, but we are not trying to blow one candle out to make a different candle burn brighter. If you like a game, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter how much it costs, if you enjoy it, you do you. We are just literally presenting some numerical information to people, to just not even to change your mind, just to literally point out some facts. But when you are pointing out a difference between one game, let's call it game A, and another game, let's call it game B, and there is 1,000 Australian dollars different between getting involved in those games, that is, in my opinion, worthy of note and worthy of talking about. Neither of us are here to poo-poo any game purveyor, but it was interesting to see these different buy-in costs, and also, just talk about them. I hope that you enjoy the chat, and remember, we're not talking about one game in detriment of another, and we're not trying to change your opinion. And I had fun talking to Vampz about this, and it's something that is interesting, and hopefully you find it interesting too. Don't forget to reach out and message if you feel the need. It's always nice to connect with all of you. If you want to sniff around our Discord server, then just use the link in the description. We'd really love to meet and interact with you. We have a weekly quiz, weekly online league, monthly painting activity, and loads more different things. It's genuinely the full care package for our fellow nerds. That is enough of the pre-ramble. Let's go.
Podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
What is good? To paint your minis, see them deployed on the table, and hear the lamentations of neckbeards.
So hey, I am here with Count Mr. Vampz. How's it going, man? You right?
Yeah, I'm getting along, just chugging along through the day as per usual. Yourself?
Nice, I'm all right. Count Vampz. What's that come from? What's the genesis of this?
So I'll give you the TLDR version. Basically, it was my screen name back in the day. I was Mr. Vampire. And then people just started calling me Vampz all the time, so I just changed it to Vampirius. And then when I started streaming, I was doing a thing called playing for X. So X being an amount of time, play a game for 30 minutes, give my thoughts on it. So I became PFX Vampz. People started referring to me as the Count from Sesame Street, so I just rolled with it and became Count Vampz.
Nice. That's good, man. I often get a little bit jealous of people who've got good names because it's good. It's like it's got a story. But I just wouldn't know what my handle would be. Got no idea.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, it was just a gaming group. We had a guy called Frost, and we had another guy called Orbit, and then I liked vampires, so that's how I rolled.
Nice. That's awesome, man. So tell us a little bit about where you live in the world.
So I live in Australia. Sorry, in Victoria specifically, and it's a nice little area. So we're on the east coast. So it's it's nice and green over here.
So Victoria is the state, correct? So what town within it?
Yes. So I live in a little place called Bendigo, which is just a bit up from Melbourne, basically. We're sort of like how do I put it? We're not quite a city, but we're not quite a town either.
And how do you find that?
Yeah, it's my preferred way to live, to be completely honest. Sometimes I'll travel to Melbourne for work or whatever I have to do, and Melbourne's a bit too busy for me personally. And then my office is actually out of town, like out of Bendigo, and that's a very small township. And so I kind of feel like I'm in the middle, and I really like that feeling.
Nice. An owner of a very prestigious beard too. How do you find beard ownership?
Yes, so beard ownership has been pretty good. So it was really funny because it was my breakup beard originally when I broke up with my last ex, and so I grew it, and I had plans to not date anyone, and then I found my current partner like within three months or something like that.
Right.
And she loved my beard so much that I'm not allowed to shave it off anymore. So.
Right. That's good, man. So what's your beard routine? Do you have like a set grooming routine for your beard?
So generally what I do is I have some beard shampoo that I use like every second day. Nice. And then I've got like this beard moisturizer that I then rub in after a shower and give it a brush, and that's basically it. So
what sort of brush do you use? Is it like is it Blades of Glory? Is it like a Verticoli, or is there an official beard brush? I guess there is a beard brush, right?
There are official beard brushes, but my specific brush is just the I've got like one of those hairbrush that has like the fine comb on one side and the less fine comb on the other. So I comb my hair with the less fine side and my beard with the fine side.
That's cool, man. So you're a very proud beard owner. It's cool. I love beard. I wish I had the patience to grow a beard, but I always kind of get to that really itchy, scraggly stage and never get past it. So kudos to you for sticking with it.
Thank you. Yeah, the itchy, scraggly phase is definitely a rough one to get through. That's for sure. And in a hot place as well. So in Australia, it gets pretty hot. So is it just a part of you? Do you just accept it now, or is it still kind of like proper sweaty? Do you get proper under beard sweat? Is that a thing? No, I don't personally get under beard sweats, but I don't actually sweat much. I don't really feel the heat generally, so I'm a bit lucky in that fashion. Right. Well, I could talk about beards all day, but we're here to talk about something very important. But before we get on to the main event, the main chat, tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel, which is how I first bumped into you. Tell us the name of it, tell us the ethos, and tell us the idea behind it. Yeah, so it's Count Vampz Painting and Wargaming, which I was tossing up between wargaming and painting, but I decided poor was a better adjective than the other one. So the plan is that I was just going to paint. That was my stream, because I was streaming games, but I never really needed any motivation to game, but I felt I needed motivation to paint the miniatures. I've got piles of them. We all have our pile of shame, as we know. So I thought I'm going to stream that, and hopefully that will get me to sort of paint consistently, which it has helped a lot with. And then I decided, well, I'll put this up on YouTube, a friend messaged me and was like, "What paints do you use?" So I made a YouTube video about that. Pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh, you know what? I may as well move to YouTube and I'll do like reviews of war games and stuff like that. The hope is that I want to get more people into the hobby and want to show people that there's more than just the popular games out there to play. And so I saw this thing in the future where I'd be reviewing games and someone would say, "Hey, can you review Kill Team or Warhammer the Old World?" Because I played a lot of Warhammer Fantasy back in the day. And so that's when I made my video that you've seen, which is why I won't support Games Workshop. And I thought I'd just make that in advance and just, if someone goes, "Hey, can you review this?" I can go check out the video on this and you'll find out why.
Yeah, man.
And
That's really cool. That's really cool. So you can go across and you can kind of, because it's quite a new channel, right? There's not too many videos that are on there, but there's one specific one that caught. I don't know. This came up in a show that's due to be released this Friday. So we're talking on the 19th of March. So on the 21st of March, there's a conversation that I had with Alessio Cavatori, and it's weird how we were talking about this idea of how you can get two different people in two different countries that are thinking about the same sort of thing and creating something like a piece of content along the same lines. So give us an idea, because you know that you've given us a title of that video. Just give us an overview of that video so people can pause this and go and watch it. And then this video is also going to form the basis of our conversation, because that's something that I was doing in the background alongside what you were doing as well. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about that video.
So basically, the reason why I don't support Games Workshop, I do have more reasons, but the major one that I made the video about was just their pricing model. I've never been overly happy with it, and it just seems to keep going up and up and up and up. And so I decided to prove my point, because I didn't want to just state this and just have people go, "Well, you've got no basis here," right? So I went through and I found, I think it was 5 other games that were all, I play a couple of them, but they were reasonably well known. And I also did 3D printing as well, just to cover my bases. And I basically just, go through all those prices and sort of show that Games Workshop is more expensive than the other ones. So,
and that's fact. That's not conjecture. That's not sniping at anybody. The pricing of as you'll hear when we chat, we're going to go through some things. The pricing of Games Workshop stuff is significantly higher. Spoiler alert! If you didn't know that. But it's also really important to note before we get into this is that we're not speaking about something in detriment of another. I've been through a very similar process to you. I'm sure if we speak about your background in a future show, which I hope that we will, we'll talk about how you first got involved in the hobby. But I got into the hobby through Games Workshop, which is great. They initiated me into the hobby. They got me into the hobby, and I just found that I just wasn't particularly personally enjoying Games Workshop games because of the way that the games were set up and the way the rules interacted with each other. And I just found that it was very expensive to play, and I found it inhibitive. I found it, I did love it in many ways. I did really like it in many ways, but I just found more and more often that I liked the thought of it more than the actually doing it more. And that was then the motivation to branch out a little bit, to learn about different things. And also that was partially down to the podcast too, is finding more about this hobby. And when you do dig around a little bit, you notice that there are, in my opinion, a lot more games that I personally enjoy a heck of a lot more, that offer a much better value proposition in terms of the buy-in and different other things. So that was obviously something that you agree with too, right?
Yes, absolutely. I've just, particularly with Warhammer, I've just felt like, whoa, the price, like particularly in Australia. Australia always tends to get a bit more screwed than other countries anyway, with the shipping and everything. But I was actually shocked once I started doing this research just how big the gap was. I was like, oh my god. And then I absolutely agree. The rules, I'm not in love. The only Games Workshop game that I think I've ever really fully fell in love with was the Lord of the Rings one, Middle Earth. I think they've renamed it now. Mm-hmm. But for me, I've always felt like there's just games out there that have slightly tighter rules, and also, there's some games out there that have very similar rules, and they just seem to go faster. You know, like you can fit like 3 or 4 games of these things in comparatively to one game of Warhammer, which takes 4 or 5 hours. So it's also a time thing.
Yeah, one thing for me is the you go I go system. I don't particularly enjoy the you go I go system where you activate and do all of your units, and I just kind of wait, and I'm very, very passive, and then I interact with all of my minis and that, and that's something that is, and people say, oh, it's outdated, and I don't necessarily think it's an outdated thing. It's not that. It's just that I don't personally really enjoy that mechanic. I think I'm far too passive 50% of the time, and I don't really have any way to interact with the opposition. Okay, so is that something that you agree with too?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Most of the games I play now are alternating activations on some system, but even when I sort of look at it, one of the biggest problems I found with Warhammer is if you went up against something like a guardsman army or something like that, and they went first, they would just shoot the hell out of your army. You'd be left with like a third of an army basically left, and then you'd have to like mount an attack back on them, and you'd be like, well, that's about it, you know, like. So it was just, I think, alternating activations, and you're much more active, and you can respond to people's movements on the fly too.
I just think it's more fun,
which is really good.
Yeah, it's more fun personally. One of, and people do it in different ways. You know, it's really important to note this isn't like a GW negative fest. You know, there's games from GW or the origins in GW that I really do like. You know, like the mechanic in Blood Bowl is something that I really do like. Blood Bowl is a game that I really do like, where you have to really plan out which individual player you're going to activate first, and if that player makes a mistake or that player fails a roll of some sort, that's your turn over. So I really do like that, because that is a you go I go, but the depth of the you go I go can be quite superficial. It might be like you do something with one player, fail a roll, and it's like, and that's my turn over. I really like that. So it's not just a GW thing, but yeah, man, so that's cool. So that's interesting. So I've always just found games that I just tend to personally like a little bit more. And I think if you're going to buy something for a certain amount of money, I don't mind that, but I need to personally feel like I'm getting good value out of that. And value is the key word that we're kind of going to talk about a little bit more. Is that it's really important to note is that value is subjective. You know, I can look at a Lamborghini and I would never buy a Lamborghini. One, I can never really afford a Lamborghini. But even if I could afford a Lamborghini, I still wouldn't buy one, because it just doesn't present a good value proposition for me. And so I kind of I look at GW products, and again, they're fantastic miniatures. I think that's really important to note, is that the miniatures are fantastic. You do pay for those, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But the models are fantastic. And the lore and the universe and the setting, amazing, and really, really good in many, many ways. But I found that this was in 2021. This is when it first started for me. Is that Dungeon Bowl was released. So it was Blood Bowl, like a new edition of Blood Bowl was released a few years before that, and then they released Dungeon Bowl, a re-release of Dungeon Bowl, which is Blood Bowl but just in a dungeon underground. And
fair enough.
In 2021. That's when I noticed that GW had gone beyond what I would call a casual purchase zone. As like up to that point, the boxes that they released were a certain amount of money. I think it was like £75 maybe, or £80, something like that. And that was, you know, a big investment, but you know, if you're playing it enough and you get enough value out of it, it was okay. But when they released that Dungeon Bowl box, I think it had gone up. I think it went up to maybe £110 or something like that. It was a big increase in 2021. And that's when I basically stopped buying products from GW, because it took it out of a casual purchase and it took it into what I would call a serious purchase, right?
Yeah, I had a fairly similar thing happen to me, but it was actually when the new combat patrols came out. So they had these getting started sets that were about 140 AUD at the time. So about £70, and you get like just sort of like maybe a 500-point army. And then they basically took these boxes and rebranded them and called them combat patrols, and suddenly they're $270. Yeah, and it's like, oh my god, like, and then I'd be like, how many points do you get from this? And it'd be like, you get like 300-400 depending on which box, and it's like, so I'm not even a quarter of a way to a 2,000-point game now.
Yeah.
Like
And-
that just blew my mind.
Yeah, and like they're saying, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's terrible. I'm not saying it should never happen. You know, everyone has got the right to sell whatever they want for whatever price they want, and also people
Yeah,
have got the right
exactly.
to enjoy those things. You know, so I'm not
Yes.
going to get on my high horse and say, oh, it's terrible. Like, you know, if people want to sell it at that, and people want to buy it at that, and people love that, that's totally fine. But I've just enjoyed myself so much more playing different games that I could buy into so much less. So let's kind of go
exactly.
so let's kind of go through, because what I really liked about the video that you created and what I really like about how you do things is that I've not met so many people that do things the way that I do, and you do them. So I love the way that you went into everything, you broke it down, and you started to not just say, oh, this is terrible and this is too expensive. You actually came across with facts and figures and proof, and for your opinion. You know, not saying that other people. It's like you was like, this is my opinion, this is what I believe, and maybe you should give that a go too. So maybe pick out one game that you like, that you've looked into, and let's talk about the price of it. So is there one that you'd like to pick out?
Yeah. So I've been recently playing this with my son, and it's Mantis Firefight. Mantix Firefight. Sorry.
Yep.
So it's actually made by a former Game Workshop employee who worked on game design with Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a sort of standard sort of sci-fi kind of setting, and there's currently 6 armies, and they're all sort of like you got your space dwarves, you've got your sort of alien hive kind of creatures called the Plague, I think. You've got like space rat men. You've got like this robot sort of faction, but what they are is they're humans that astrally project themselves into robots, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got 2 sort of human factions, which one's kind of like your Imperial Guard, basically, and the other one is like these Enforcer mercenaries who kind of have like power armor and stuff like that. So it's a really cool game, and one thing I really love about this particular game is your commanders aren't Billy Badass. You know, they're not like Manius Calgar who wades into battle and kills 400 Tyranids by himself. You've got to like keep them behind your own lines and protect them, because all of your command abilities come off your commander. So if they die, you get no more command abilities. It's really cool how that sort of functions. So I think that one's the one to pick.
So how did you find out about that, and how did you begin to get interested in it?
So the way I found out about it is I'm a big fan of one-page rules. So I've been playing Grimdark Future with my son, and I was reading a post on Reddit, basically of someone being like, is there any games that are sort of like this but a bit more complicated? Because one of the big criticisms towards it is a bit too simplistic. I never found that, but that's one of the criticisms. Mm-hmm. And so someone was like, oh, you should check out Mantix Firefight. It's basically this, but better. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay. And, at first my knee-jerk reaction was to be like bitter, but I decided, no, I'm going to go and check this out. Mm-hmm. I'm nothing if not thorough when I get a recommendation, even if I don't particularly like the way they recommended it. So I went and had a look, and I made an army list, made my son an army list, and we played a few games, and I just absolutely fell in love with it.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. So let's go through the 1,000-point list of Forge Fathers that you very kindly created.
Yeah, no worries.
Average points are like 1,000 to 1,000 points for Firefight games. So go through a list that you've built, including the rulebook and dice, and let's get a figure for how much it would cost us to get involved in that.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, we start with our rulebook. Now, our rulebook is very good. It actually has all of the force information for every army plus the rules. So once you buy the rulebook, that's it. You don't need to buy any more codexes or anything like that. I think they do have some supplemental sort of campaign stuff, but as far as that, you just pay for the rulebook. So that's 60 AUD or 40 USD or 30 pounds. So whichever one you sort of look at. So that covers a huge portion of the cost right there. And then they've got specialty dice. So this game uses D8s. So I didn't put that in the price list because I was like, I feel like just regular dice, you kind of expect that when you tape measure regular dice, you expect that. But they've got specialty D6 called command dice. I 3D printed mine, but obviously that's not an option for everyone. So a set of dice is $20 AUD, 15 USD, or £10. So not too shabby on that one. Mm-hmm. Then our next step is of course a starter box. Now this particular scenario, the idea is you've bought a starter box with a friend. That's how I did all my starter boxes. So you've got another player in for you. Therefore, you pay half each, and you take your Forge Guard in this particular scenario, and they take the Vermin, which are the rat men. So that gets you to I think around about 750 points, just that box. Mm-hmm. And that box comes with a Huskal, which is a leader, so your commander. It comes with 3 groups of 5 steel warriors, which are sort of like the dwarven line infantry. You've got your Forge Guard, which I suppose the best way to describe them is they'd be Terminators for the Warhammer viewers, and then you've got a Sturmhammer battle tank, which is just a really decent tank, basically. Mm-hmm. And for all that, you get... So I think that's about... it's got to be about 30, roughly. Just wait, Forge Guard is 1, 15 Steel Warriors, 6, and then a tank. So probably about 28 miniatures you get in that box, roughly. Mm-hmm. And then for that, you pay 95 AUD, 70 USD, or 48 British pounds. And then you just need to pick up a couple extra guys to sort of round the group out. So I just got a Chief Brockier, which is another commander, 10 Brockier themselves, which is kind of like a mining unit, and an assault tank. So, and then that sort of gets you to 960, but with no upgrades. So once you do upgrades and everything like that, you'd be easily able to get to the higher tier of a standard game, which is 1,250 points. Mm-hmm. And the character is about $20, and then we got 15 USD, 10 British pounds. The team of miners is $45 or 35 USD or 22.5 for pounds, and then the other assault tank is we'll just say 70 AUD, 50 USD or 35 British pounds, and so that gives you a total of 960 points with no upgrades, which you'd easily be able to get over your 1,000 at that point. And so the grand total for that is 309 AUD, 225 USD, and 155.5 British pounds. And that gets you a full army.
Yes. And so when you started doing this research and when you started looking into it, what were your thoughts on stuff?
The first thing I had to do was figure out what all the standard point costs were for every game, which some of them were a bit more difficult than others. And then I was like, so I'm going to do the standard points for every single army, because I thought, well, I knew Warhammer was 2,000 was the standard, and I was thinking, well, I don't want to make non-standard armies. I don't want to try and equal Games Workshop's miniatures count, even though I did do that with a couple of extra little bits. But what I was looking at was, what do you need to just get an army off the ground and go to your local gaming store and play a game? Mm-hmm. That was my overall goal. Mm-hmm. So as I went through, I wanted to work out, okay, what is the cheapest possible way I can get 1,000 points, for example, in Forge Fathers, or 2,000 points in Space Marines, or 6,000 points in BattleTech, whatever it happened to be at the time. From that, I just made an army list, got to the 1,000 points or 2,000 or whatever it was, and then I just went through on websites. Generally, I tried to get the official website. Otherwise, I just took whatever I was able to find as a general price consensus, and just calculated it all up.
Yeah. And it's important to note that this is if you're buying brand new. So if you're looking into a
Yes.
second-hand market, it could potentially be a heck of a lot cheaper. But it is significantly cheaper than GW. So it's important to offer both sides. So if we were being completely critical and open-minded, the miniatures, in my opinion, are not as good as GW miniatures. They're not as crisp. They're not as well designed, in my opinion. I'm not saying that they're not good, but that would be a downside. And would that be something that you would echo too? Is that the quality of the miniatures just aren't quite at that level?
I would agree that pretty much Games Workshop is the gold standard of miniature creation. I would never disagree with someone who said, "Oh, Games Workshop makes bad miniatures." That's just not a thing. So
but having said that, their miniatures are really good, though, right? There's not saying they're bad miniatures for this game, but I think that is a comparison that would be a fair comparison to make, right? Sorry, I interrupted you. Carry on.
No, that's all good. No, I absolutely agree with you. I do think that certainly Mantic's miniatures aren't as nice as Games Workshop miniatures, and you sort of have to be, that makes sense to me. That's not a crazy step to take. But I guess for me, I think the miniatures do their job, and that's sort of what I'm looking at really when it comes to a game. As long as they look cool on the table. Yeah. If they don't look quite as nice as other people's miniatures, I find that acceptable. Obviously, other people may not.
It depends on the level that you're painting. Yeah, and it's the level that you're painting to also. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, I am not going to ever be an award-winning painter, and I don't have that,
I agree
that interest right now. I don't necessarily have that interest to really push the envelope with my painting style and really push the limit of those things. I'm more of paint them to a really good tabletop standard, but that's where I go. So that downswing in the mini quality, the perceived downswing in mini quality, that doesn't really personally affect me too much. As long as they look kind of cool, as long as they look all right, as long as they look good from the tabletop, I don't mind that so much. So it's important to factor in these things, right? And so you said you played the game and you enjoy it.
Yes. Oh yeah, the game is lots of fun. It's actually rather on the quicker side too, which is quite nice. Like it's got a good length. It's not too long, not too short. The command system is really cool because you roll these command dice and you get a number of points a turn, and all your abilities come out of your commanders, so you've got to try and protect them. And they have this really cool height system in the game. So it's the first miniature game I've ever seen where miniatures will actually block line of sight for other miniatures. Mm-hmm. And so everything on the table has a height number. And so, for example, if you take something like a Dreadnought, it's height 4. So it's taller than most buildings, but it can still hide behind height 4 buildings. But a commander is like size 2. So he can actually hide behind his own Dreadnought and you can't shoot him. Mm-hmm. Because his height is smaller than the other one. Yeah, so once again, body blocking your commander actually becomes an important strategy in the game so that your commander doesn't get shot to pieces.
Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting mechanic, isn't it? Because some people want their heroes to be front and center. If we take Star Wars Legion, which is a game that you've also mentioned, it's a game that I play.
Yes.
Star Wars Legion is the opposite to that. Star Wars Legion is a character game with a supporting cast where your leader needs to be, or the majority of the time, there are some squishy ones, but generally speaking, you want your commander to be doing the stuff that guy would be doing or that person would be doing in Star Wars, right? So that's an interesting mechanic. That's cool, man. So that's a firefight.
Yes.
Comparatively speaking, in terms of shock level compared to buying off-the-shelf GW, how does Firefight, how does that link to the GW? Are you shocked to the extreme, or is it just like, it's a bit cheaper, but it's fine?
Well, I mean, to me, it's a big difference because 2,000 points of Space Marines for me to buy from Games Workshop is $1,400. That's not a cheap amount of money. While I can get 1,000 points of Forge Fathers for 309, and in fact, this was a little thing that I even put together for the video. I did a 2,000 points Forge Fathers list so the size is pretty much the same, and that would only cost me $469 from Mantic if I made a 2,000 point Forge Father list, which would be overkill to the extreme. it probably takes like probably 6 hours to play the game. But I was just like, I can get 2,000 points of Forge Fathers for 470. We'll just round it up to, or I could spend $1,400 on Space Marines, which is like that is a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'm a big advocate of informed choice. I think if you create the situation, you engineer a situation where you weigh up all the options, all the different ideas, all the different possibilities, and then you still decide to go with this thing that you wanted in the first place, then as long as you're making an informed choice, that's totally fine. And equally, if you're not making an informed choice, if you're just making a decision you're happy with, then that's fine. But as I looked at those comparisons in my own research and thinking, and then as I really watched your video too, it's like, jeepers, wow, this is a huge difference. This is a huge marked difference. You can get involved in this game for this amount of money, buying off the shelf, not even mind buying second hand, and I can get involved in this game for that much. It's a marked difference. It's a shocking difference. It's just remind us, like $1,400 AUD compared to about $450 for the 2,000 points, right?
Yeah, pretty much 470, but yes, yeah. So
$1,000 Australian dollars.
Yes, 1,400 AUD. And as I said, Australians do get a bit screwed in this particular area anyway. So, but even if we look at, say, something like Great British Pounds, for example, so the total for 2,000 points of Space Marines is $527, which is 3 times more than the next closest expensive game. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like that's still a lot. It's not quite the 5 times of the Australian, but 3 times more expensive. That's it's not a cheap hot dog to swallow, basically.
No, and it's all about weighing it up and thinking it out, right? Because like I said, if you do genuinely get enough value out of the GW army, you do get enough painting time. You love the miniatures, you love everything, single thing about it. You love playing the game. Like there's no one can turn around and say that that's not okay. However, there are other options available. There are other things that are around, and I've got one. So I'm a big player of A Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones game by Simon and Dark Sword Miniatures. And just recently, I priced up the whole cost of an army for Greyjoys. That is the army that I got involved in. And when I first worked it out, I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. So I just bought one of every unit. So I bought the starter box, and I bought one of every unit in the army, which is no need to do. So the starter box is a certain amount of money. It's about $99 and each individual box is around kind of $50 So there's 9 extra boxes, and there's no need to buy extra boxes. You get the medium size game is 40 points, so that's a medium size game, and you get just 40 points in the start box, and all the miniatures are pre-assembled, so you can literally buy the box in a store, you can crack it open, and you can play in the store the same time that you buy it, because all the miniatures are assembled. Obviously, it won't be painted, but you can only get so much for $100, right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I found that worked out as, and this is overkill, and there's no need to do this, but with buying all those things, that works out at $420, 332 Great British Pounds, and that would be about 660 Australian dollars. Now, when I worked that out, I was like, that's expensive. But then when you actually work back, if you're using 660 Australian dollars, it's still less than half the price of the GW army, not even a full army. The 2,000 points. So that was something that was a big investment for me. Now, I only made that investment because I painted an army and I didn't really like how it played so much, so I sold it. So I was like, I'm at the position now where I can buy a whole faction. So not even a list, not even a 40-point list. I'm talking about buying an entire faction. I could buy an entire faction for that. And so I went from thinking, wow, that's expensive, to, well, it is expensive, but it's nothing compared to that. And so that's interesting. And what's also important to note here is you alluded to it when you talked about the Forge Fathers. You mentioned how the rule book contains all the lists, and there's no codex, there's no kind of different things. And in A Song of Ice and Fire, that it's a living rule book. So at any point you can download the rule book from the CMON website.
and they work in seasons. And every season they make certain adaptations, and you can download them for free. So they update the rulebook. You just download the rulebook for free, and they also have a certain amount of cards that you use for the factions. They just show you the cards that have been updated, and you can print them off from the website in the same size. They've got like tarot card size and then regular playing card size.
Cool.
You just print them off, and you just get like a Pritt stick. I steal my daughter's glue from a craft set. I just stick the new card over the old one, and it's just really good. And I kind of think about other practices that companies might have where they, each year or 2 years, they sell you a supplement book, or they bring out a new codex, or they bring out different things, and it's just like, it just feels like you're getting squeezed all the time, because those books aren't cheaper. So there's a number of games that kind of release their rules for free, or a rule book for free, and that feels good. It feels better,
I think sorry.
No, don't be sorry. Go.
I think living rulebooks are starting to become more popular. I actually did a list of War Machine last night just for, War Machine was the expensive game back in the day when I first started playing. So I decided to do a quick one on that. And they have a living rulebook. It's in their app. You have an army list builder. It's all free. And the one-page rule guides, when you buy a rulebook, you have that rulebook permanently, regardless of how many issues they go through with that rulebook. Mm-hmm. So if you bought the second edition Grimdark Future rulebook, for example, when they update it to third, that was a free update. Mm-hmm. So I think living rulebooks are definitely the way to go at this point. I think that just gets people in a bit easier because it's one expenditure that they can just go, oh, I don't have to worry about the rules. I've got the app or whatever it happens to be, and they're like, I'm covered on that, so I've just got to buy the miniatures now.
Mm. It's just, I don't know, it's different. It's different, and it just leaves me with a much fonder sense of things where, like, the 28th of March we're just about to have season 6 of A Song of Ice and Fire, and they're going to tweak the balance, they're going to update a few different things, and it's just nice to know that I just need to download and print the rulebook. I know that I just need to print off the updated cards and just trim them off and stick them on, because I put all my cards in card sleeves anyway. So as soon as you stuck it on the card, it's just there, and it's just nice. It's good to know that I don't have to order a big book, $50 or whatever it is, and kind of use it and end up with a whole kind of bookcase full of books that I just simply don't use. And I'm not saying that they're doing it to look after the planet and to be eco-friendly, but it kind of certainly does help. So we've got a sci-fi game there. Yeah, we've got a firefight. We've got a fantasy game, A Song of Ice and Fire, and if you haven't checked that out, by the way, I don't want to make you spend money, but there's a show recently I did with Randall from Imperial Minis YouTube channel. Check it out. It's just awesome. I just really, really enjoy the tactical depth of A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm not going to talk about it.
It's certainly on the list.
Let's go for a historical then. So Bolt Action is a World War II game, and that is something that a lot of people know. So talk to us about your Bolt Action list build. Talk us about the mentality and ethos of it, and then kind of go through the Bolt Action list build.
Yeah, no worries. So basically, I'm gonna expose my experience for Bolt Action here. I've only actually ever played Bolt Action twice, and it was back when it first got released. So in like 2012, I think it was. Mm-hmm. There were two guys at our gaming club who played it, and I was like, "Oh, that's Bolt Action. That looks pretty cool." And they're like, "Hey, why don't you take my army, and then we'll swap. We'll sort of do a round robin thing." So I got to play a couple games. So I don't really know much about third edition. It is on the list of things I've got to get done. Mm-hmm. So basically, I just did some quick research into it. Worked out sort of that people mostly play around about 1,000 points in a regular game of Bolt Action. Mm-hmm. And so I found this British airborne army, and they had Warlord had nicely listed the point value of everything in the army. So when I went through, I'm like, this is 998 points. Perfect. So I looked at the rulebook, of course, which I should probably mention also, my rulebooks that I priced were all paper rulebooks. Mm-hmm. Just so everyone knows. Normally, I'm a bit more of a digital person when it comes to rulebooks, because if I owned all my rulebooks, the floor would cave in my house. But I know that many people, when they do wargaming or D&D or whatever it happens to be, they tend to like having those physical books. Mm-hmm. So I went with that. So the rule book for Bolt Action is 70 AUD or 50 USD or 35 pounds. So I think that's pretty fairly priced, and that covers a lot of stuff. Obviously, you can get those expansion books once you sort of really get into the game that like cover your army more specifically.
Yep.
And then the starter box, which once again is your 1,000 points, so you don't need to buy anything else to get started. That's 150 AUD, 110 USD, or 69 British pounds. So our totals at 998 points, 220 for AUD, 160 for USD, 104 for pounds. So pretty good, pretty damn good price overall, I think, on that one.
For sure, and going back to the AUD price of the 2,000 point Space Marines, 1,400. So you're saving about 1,200 Australian dollars by getting into Bolt Action as opposed to getting into Warhammer 40k, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And if I ended up by spending anywhere near close to $1,400, I think I'd fill my house with World War II miniatures. I think at that point.
So I think that's a kind of point made in terms of that. And there's numerous different ones that you've done. That it's not just a one-off, you know. And it does get hard to support. It does get hard to back. It does get hard to justify when it's just the comparison is radically different. So just take that one between Bolt Action. You can have a similar sized game, similar length game, similar quality game, even if you want to say that Bolt Action and Warhammer 40k rules are kind of similar. You know, they're both tabletop war games. One is in World War II. One is in a sci-fi setting. But the cost for that difference, it's probably radical, right? It's a radical difference. And the question would be, the question would be, is it radically better? I don't know. I guess it is for some people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing. And, you know, as I said, I made the video Why I Don't Support Games Workshop with the idea that originally I actually had 4 or 5 different talking points. But I decided to just settle on the price issue as the one I'd cover, because I could have probably talked about those issues for 2-3 hours. And I'm like, I just want a nice, succinct video, so I'm just going to cover the major one. But, you know, like, I don't think Warhammer is a perfect game. I don't think it's a bad game by any metric. But I think there are many games that are better than it for me personally. And I think Bolt Action, for me, I would actually, when I played Bolt Action and sort of watching games being played, I find watching and playing Bolt Action much more interesting than 40k for me personally. Once again, total personal opinion on this one.
Mm-hmm. But
so for me, it's hard to sort of balance that metric.
Mm-hmm. But there's some people that would say it is value for money, and I'd like to hear from those people too, because I just found, like I said, I think I mentioned it just before, I found that I liked the thought of it so much more than actually the doing it. The painting the minis, I think the painting the minis, no doubt, like really, really cool. Like painting a Space Marine army, I was fortunate to do that. Painting, you know, various different miniatures and things like that from GW, really, really good. That's beyond a doubt. But it's just very hard to kind of reconcile the difference in the price with it. But fair play to them, like keep on doing it. Like I'm not saying they should change. And so that's kind of like off the shelf, buying new from the company areas. But there's a way that if you really do enjoy 40k or AOS or any of GW games, you know, you can maybe look secondhand. You can probably take that cost buy-in of 1,400 Australian dollars. You can probably take that down maybe to half, maybe a little over half, if you take your time and shop wisely, right?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I have picked up some absolute bargains from different places. When I started back up again to play 8th edition, because that's when I came back in, I stopped pretty shortly after that particular point, but we won't cover that in great depth. But basically, I went to my local pawn shop, and someone had put a box of Space Marines in there, and it was like $15 or something like that. Mm-hmm. Which was an $80 kit at this particular moment in time when I went in there. And so that, you know, you can definitely go and pick stuff up. for much cheaper. And I do actually plan to do a video on wargaming on a budget, so that's when I'm going to sort of focus in on that particular sort of, shop here, do this, maybe have a look at this.
Mm-hmm.
But for this particular one, my point was Games Workshop wants me to pay a certain price. That's sort of what I was shooting at with this video, and so that's the price I'm sort of going to hold their feet to the fire on in this particular video, basically.
No, and it's legit. Yeah. It's legit, and that's where everyone starts, right? And it's not so much in England, because people don't tend to game in gaming stores, but in the US, people game in gaming stores, and so you feel like you need to buy your army from the store because you go and play there. So that's what when I lived in the US, that's what I would do. I'd kind of go to the store every second or third visit. I'd make sure I picked up a box for a new unit for the army or something like that, and a slow grow. And in Australia, it's kind of like a hybrid between the two. So shopping secondhand could obviously cut that down. But also there's lots of different mini agnostic rule sets, and this is where we start looking at extremes. Because you can play with rocks. Right, you don't have to play with miniatures,
basically,
right?
yeah.
You could, if you wanted to play 40k so much, you could say, yeah, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna buy the rule set. I'm gonna buy the codex for the appropriate army that I want, and then I'm just gonna paint these pebbles certain colors, and these pebbles represent my army. Like you can do that, like for sure.
Yeah.
And so a while ago, I kind of asked different groups that I was part of to tell me about which games they like and how much was the buy-in, and it was really interesting to see people's stories and hear people's stories. And I'm a big advocate of what I call gaming a genre and not a specific rule set. So I found in like 2021 when GW went out of kind of casual purchase range, and even before that, I started to be like, I don't need a specific army for this game and that game that are kind of both the same. Like a World War II army is a World War II army. I don't need to get a specific one for this game, a specific one for that game. So I started to, instead of gaming specific rule sets, I started to game genres. And so I started to build up slowly over the course of probably about 5-6 years. I started to build up like miniatures in a certain genre. And then I found so many mini agnostic rule sets that I could just buy a rule set for $10, $20. Sometimes they were free. And I could play that game with no buy-in because I already had the miniatures. And all I needed to do is just invest a little bit of money to get a completely different game, a completely different experience, but I could still use the same miniatures. And so is that something that you've bumped into yet, or are you still kind of finding your way with that?
No, absolutely. So the big step for me is finding Grimdark Future, which is, I mean, people call it simple Warhammer, but I don't think that's a correct moniker anymore. They've definitely stepped further away from Warhammer. But the idea was they wanted to make a mini-agnostic game, and they have things like Battle Brothers instead of Space Marines, or Human Defense Force, things like that. They're sort of shifting their names a bit, so instead of Sisters of Battle, they have Blessed Sisters, and their whole entire game is mini-agnostic, with the idea that you could take your Warhammer minis that you already own, and you could just play their game with it. So around that time, I got a 3D printer, and once you kind of get a 3D printer, almost every game becomes mini-agnostic at that point.
Yeah.
So with Mantic, I don't own any of the Mantic miniatures. I just use my Grimdark Future miniatures, and we just sort of, play around with them. So, for example, the Forge Fathers, I just use my Space Dwarves. For Enforcers, I have an Enforcer army. I just use a mix of, I've got these cool Roman-based Imperial Guardsmen.
Mm-hmm.
So I use a mix of them with some Roman-based Space Marines, and they sort of make up the core of that particular army.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, mini-agnostic is just so cool. I really like that as a concept, and I think that should be definitely a concept that is more accepted going forward. I understand with tournaments and stuff like that, if you have a Warhammer tournament, you want to be able to go, well, that guy's carrying a flamethrower, so I know not to go near him.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love the idea of being able to be like, yeah, I'm just showing up with my, group of Space Dwarves, and I'm playing whatever game I'm playing with these Space Dwarves, whether or not it's a skirmish sci-fi game, or Mantic, or Grimdark Future, or I'm playing, Voltan in Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just a really big fan of miniature agnostic games as a general idea. Like, just overall, I think we should be pushing more for that.
Do you play often? Do you play a lot?
Certainly not as often as I used to. I probably get maybe 2 games a week with my son. He's quite young though. He's about 8, so teaching him battle strategy at the same time can be a bit of a difficult go in. But he likes Grimdark Future. He's a big fan of Mantic's Firefight, and he absolutely loves Gaslands, which we've been playing together. Which is a super fun game.
That's a great example of a mini agnostic game. You know, you can pick up some Hot Wheels, especially you mentioned there about 3D printing, like that. That's really lends itself to that whole 3D printing and kind of Hot Wheels kind of amalgamation. That's pretty cool, and it's an interesting side to the hobby too, being able to think about something as a concept and as an idea, and then to kind of make that concept become a reality. And your team that you showed us the other day, you can talk to us a little bit about that and why that game is so interesting. So what was your recent Gaslands team that you put together?
So my recent Gaslands team is a team called Junk Food, and they are a bunch of food-themed Hot Wheels cars that I, of course, 3D printed weapons for and stuck stuff to them, and then made them look appropriately grimy. And they basically every team in Gaslands has a sponsor, and these sponsors are sort of like your factions, basically, for lack of a better description. So this particular team is Slime, and Slime is from the Australian Wastelands, and they are basically just your stock standard insane raider kind of clan that don't take very good care of their cars and sort of treat everyone with contempt. And so I painted them up, and we're doing a campaign as part of the Gaslands review that I'm working on. And yeah, I've got like a sushi themed one called Servo Sushi. I've got a donut shaped one called Go Nuts Donuts. I've got 2 ones that they use flamethrowers as a rule, but they actually spew acid in universe, called Blue Raspberry, which is like a jelly shaped car, and a Lemon Squash, which is another jelly shaped car. And then my favorite one, Princess Cake, who is this very ostentatious like princess themed cake where it's like green and pink. And she's got rockets and a shotgun. So
that's cool. What I'm kind of building up to is this idea that if you understand the idea of something being mutually exclusive. So if something is mutually exclusive, I might say like fun and Gaslands, those 2 things are mutually exclusive. So fun only exists when people are playing Gaslands. We know that's simply not true. So if we try and apply if we are trying to apply that idea, is there anything that's, if there is GW and something mutually exclusive? Is there anything that GW offers? Is there anything that you can get through GW that you think you cannot get anywhere else that you've seen so far?
To me, to be completely honest, the one thing I think GW has always excelled at is their lore. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I'd say you can't get that lore anywhere else, but they really know how to push that lore onto the universe, basically, as a whole. And I just think it's very... I cannot fault them in that. Like, I can't fault them in their lore building. And I've never seen anyone be quite so effective at it as they are, as far as wargaming goes, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of anything. I can think of things that they do really well. I completely agree with you with lore. I really believe that their minis are market leading. I think they are the market leader, but there is a cost to that.
I agree, yeah.
There is a cost to that. You pay for that. Going back to the Lamborghini analogy, it's like they are the Lamborghini, but just because something is a Lamborghini doesn't mean that is the whole part of a Lamborghini is you don't really see that many around, and they're pretty rare.
Yes,
that makes it interesting. But I just kind of think about the games that I've played, the games I've encountered, and I find it harder and harder to be able to justify it, to reconcile this idea of the cost, and if you love it, I love that. That's great. But I wish that I kind of had a different route into the hobby in some ways, and I'd kind of skipped that, because I wouldn't say I wasted money. I wouldn't say I wasted time. I didn't. I value that part of my life, and I really value that journey. But I kind of really wish that I'd maybe got involved in bolt action first. Kind of wish that I got involved in Gaslands first. Those kind of things, because I think I still would have had the same joy, if not maybe more, and I think I would have invested like significantly less in that. And yeah, it's just something. So I hope that maybe someone listens to this, or someone passes it on to somebody else who's maybe thinking about getting involved in the hobby. And I think what the advice would be is, instead of jumping in, like, take your time, because there's so many people with lots of armies. You mentioned there about how you got a lot of miniatures from different backgrounds. Quite often you can go to a store, and quite often you can bump into somebody who's got a demo force. I keep demo forces. I've got 2 A Song of Ice and Fire armies. I've got 2 Star Wars Legion armies. I've got 2 Bolt and Action armies. I've got 2 Flames of War armies. So that if ever I bump into somebody who's never even heard of the hobby, and they want to try it but they don't want to invest in it, I can show them a few games, and then whichever one they like best, that's when they can go and invest in it themselves. And in the meantime, we can just play with the minis that I already have already. And so taking your time and thinking about things before you jump is something that's key. And one end of the spectrum would be, to build up maybe to buy a mini agnostic rule set and slowly build up a faction for that, but then also keep your eyes open for other rule sets that you could play that with the same minis. There's so many amazing skirmish games. There's so many amazing games that you can pick up super cheap. We've not even really talked about Kings of War. So Kings of War, you use multi-base in. So as long as you've got the same size base for the units come on base sizes. As long as you've got the right size base, it doesn't really matter what you can do. And one of my friends, Patch, he does amazing things with bases. There's no requirement for there to be a certain amount of models. There's no requirement for anything other than to be the same size base, and it just gives you so much freedom to be able to do lots of cool stuff. So
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, our kind of hour is very quickly running out, which is unfortunate. But I mentioned at the start of the show that we'll try and get you back on, and we can talk about maybe just your hobby journey and your painting journey in the future. So as we wrap up this kind of value chat, I've kind of said my piece in terms of what I believe where value lies and what people should do before maybe they jump in. Have you got any closing thoughts? Have you got any kind of closing points that you want to make in terms of finding value or not being able to support certain companies because of their pricing?
I think the thing is that when it comes to finding value, it's definitely a smart idea to shop around. What I'd love to see in the future, I think, is a few more of these war games popping up. Where, because if someone approaches me and I go, oh, I play war games, they're like, Warhammer or Age of Sigma or 40k, and it's like, no, I don't play either of those. I think there's this very thing where Warhammer is synonymous with wargaming currently, and I'd like to see a little bit of separation so that people can come in and try new games or different games, or start somewhere else where they might not necessarily have to pay as large of an amount of money. And I'd really like to see sort of a shift. I don't want, and I want to make it clear, I don't want to see Games Workshop go out of business or anything like that. I don't want to see Warhammer 40k go down in flames or anything. I'm happy for them to be a presence in the market. I'd just like to see where we talk about war games, and it's on the list of war games that are brought up, like Bolt Action, Warhammer, War Machine, BattleTech. There's like maybe like a list of 10 games instead of one game that seems to be in the forefront of that particular idea. And that's why I wanted to do this video, was in the hope that people would sort of branch out, or they could find someone who goes, well, I'm not getting into wargaming because it's too expensive, and someone can go, hey, look at this video. It's not actually that expensive to play a game of Bolt Action with me. So what do you think? And maybe we can get some more people in, because I want the community to get bigger, right? I think that's what we all want. We want a nice big community where we can easily play games with each other and not have to worry about it. So that's really the point of my video, and the price discussion was to hopefully get more people in and get more people gaming. And if they want to go play Warhammer, absolutely fine, not a problem. So
yeah, and it's important to also mention about, like, generally speaking, stuff is getting a lot more expensive. Stuff that's essential, because wargaming is not an essential thing. Like heat, light, warmth, cover for, the weather, things like there's certain things that are essential, and wargaming is not an essential. It's a leisure thing. But I think
exactly.
With everything else that's potentially getting more expensive, it gets harder to justify that too. So have you had any feedback to the video? Has anyone kind of reached out and kind of given some feedback to it?
So I've only really had a couple comments. One of them was basically like, he just 3D prints everything, but he'll occasionally treat himself with a Games Workshop model kit. And I thought, well, that's great. That's the way to go about it, really, in that particular scenario. And someone was like, wow, I knew Warhammer was expensive, but I didn't realize just how much more expensive it was than everywhere else. So they're basically the two comments I've got on that particular video. I'm absolutely open to have a discussion about it. If someone wants to come in and go, hey, I don't think this was a fair point with Warhammer, I'm absolutely happy to have that discussion in the comment section of the video with them. That's not a problem.
What would you see would be the contrary stance? Why would somebody argue for it, in your opinion?
So I think the thing is that there's two things which I tried to cover in the video, and the first one is obviously the quality of Games Workshop minis, which, they're fair enough. But at that point, I'm happy to play what I'd consider a premium price, and I'd probably class Games Workshop prices currently as like almost super premium prices. So I didn't mind. I wasn't happy when I was paying $80 a box, but that was acceptable. Well, I think now we've gone a step slightly beyond acceptable. And the other one, of course, is, well, Games Workshop armies are twice the size of all the other armies, so of course they're going to cost more. But as I've proven, you could buy an army twice the size and still come in under half the cost for most of these games.
Interesting stuff. It's food for thought, and so as we kind of round out, like, I wanted to say first and foremost, thank you for coming onto the show. Thank you for agreeing to come onto the show. Thank you for the diligent work in the background to kind of crunch all these numbers and kind of get all this information. It's great that you're somebody who is able to do that instead of just kind of having an event or having a rant or just throwing stuff out there. You've taken the time to create a number of different comparisons, and the specific games that we talk about is only a fraction. You've got many different games, so you can go and check out the video. I'll make sure I put a link in the description to this podcast, and you can go and have a look at it, and go and look at your beautiful beard and listen to what's been said and form our own decisions and our own ideas on things. Because if you like it and you enjoy it, it doesn't really matter, But I'm a big advocate of figuring out the value proposition and what presents me with the best value proposition. And if I can have as much fun as this but pay a third of the price, well, that's a no-brainer. I'll pay a third of the price to get the same enjoyment out of it. But yeah, man, thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate it, and it's really good, interesting food for thought. And I hope you get a lot more views and comments on your video, and I'm looking forward to seeing more in the future.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, and it's been good fun. And I was wondering if I could just do a little sneaky, tiny little thing I found out earlier today. It's a very short thing.
Yeah, for sure. Instantly nervous.
So,
okay, go on.
No, I found an old school Games Workshop ad for Space Marines back in the 1988. And it has their price and how many you get in a box of Space Marines.
Okay.
Would you like to take a shot in the dark at how much you... this is in pounds too. How much you may have paid back then and how many Space Marines you would have gotten?
1988, I would say you would get a blister pack... a box of 10, and it would cost £8.50.
Well, the price is actually surprisingly close. So it's £10, but you get 30 Space Marines.
Jeepers!
Yep.
30 Space Marines for £10. That's
30.
Good deal.
Yep.
So there's this thing in England. It's called. Do you know? Have you ever heard of a chocolate bar called a Freddo? Have you heard of a Freddo?
Yes.
Before? So a Freddo is like a chocolate frog, for people that don't know what a Freddo is. So it's like a little chocolate frog. And there's a website, I think it's called like Inflation in Relation to Freddo. And what it talks about, so when I was a kid back in the day, a Freddo was 10 pence. 10 pence.
Yeah.
And Freddo today is like over 30 pence. And so it talks about how how crazy that is. You've got this thing, it's the same. I think you actually get less chocolate now, but it's moved from 10 pence to 30 pence. You actually get less chocolate. And so it'd be interesting to know about, if you're paying £10 for 30 Space Marines, how, what is the cost per Space Marine now compared to the cost per Space Marine then? That would be a very interesting comparison. I think that'd be cool.
Yes, yeah, I thought that was good. I will say that the £10 buying power nowadays is the equivalent of £25 in today's money.
Right, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so that it's pretty crazy.
It is cool, and that's the thing, is that I lived in America for 4 years, and one of the reasons that I left is that I just started to get really frustrated with how the prices were just on the cusp of taking the piss. So everything was just on the cusp of, should I sell my car? Because the car insurance is just, and it was just, they were genius. It was like just under that figure, that unassailable figure. It's just below that figure of me just selling a car and buying a bike. And so I think we were on the same thing. But and more power to them. Honestly, this is really important. More power to them.
Yeah, exactly.
It's if you can sell them at that and people will buy them at that, no problem. Do that. It's not a GW problem. I don't think they're bad guys. Well, why shouldn't they do that? But it'll be interesting. It is interesting. That whole world is interesting. That's cool, man. But anyway, nice. That's a great bit to end with. Thanks a lot for me. I really appreciate it. And happy gaming. And maybe we'll see you on the show again soon. And you can talk about your own personal hobby journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to come on whenever you got a spot free. So.
So there you go, episode 234 all wrapped up there. Thanks to Mr. Vampz. What's his name? Is he called Derek? Is he called Peter? Is he called Frank? Is he called Tiramisu? Who knows? That's the little bit of the intrigue when someone's got like a handle like Count Vampz. What's he actually called? Gerald Sidebottom. It's a little bit like when you roll a d6. This is a different story if I go back to that one. I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was saying that if you roll a d6, each number is equally as likely to pop up as the other one, no matter what has come before it. So if I roll a d6 and get a 1, and I roll a d6 and get a 1 is just as likely to come up the third time as it was the first time, in terms of that one individual dice roll. And he just couldn't get his head around it. Every time you roll a dice, a 1 is just as likely to come up as a 6, regardless of what comes up before. And that's called the gambler's fallacy. So you might roll a 1 and think, okay, well, I rolled a 1 this time, so when I roll the dice again, a 1's less likely to come up because I rolled a 1 just last time. No, that's incorrect. Every time I roll a d6, a 1 is just as likely to come up as it was the first time I rolled a 1. Now, what's the likelihood of rolling 3 1s consecutively? That's a different equation. But every time you do each individual dice roll, a 1 is just as likely to come up as it was the time previously. And it's simple, but if you think about it too much, you think it's more complicated than it actually is, but it's not. But anyway, what is Count Vamp's name? I don't know. This is like Schrodinger's cat as well, is that we know him as Count Vampz. So what his name is both Count Vampz and also his actual name. His name's anything. His name could be anything, and it's as likely to be completely anything as it is. So the likelihood of his name being Mr. Egg is just as likely as his name being his actual name, until he tells us what his name is. Anyway, it's getting far too deep. Anyway, Schrodinger's cat. That's a pretty interesting theory. The gambler's fallacy. That is a very interesting concept too. There you go. This is deep. This is philosophic inquiry into nothing. You can check those out. The gambler's fallacy, Schrodinger's cat, the Dunning-Kruger effect. That's another one that I was looking at the other day. The Dunning-Kruger effect. You can research out in your own time if you want to do that. The Dunning-Kruger effect. That's complete down to you. But anyway, good chat with Mr. Vampz. Always good to meet somebody new. All the best to him in the future with his YouTube channel and the different things that he tries to put together. If you haven't checked out Count Vampz Painting and Wargaming, if you like the sound of what he's doing, then you can go and check that out. Cost and values, something that's always really interesting to me, always something that's really interesting to a number of different people. And shocking, I think I mentioned it during the show, like shocking, like the GW prices are shocking, and not shocking in like a necessarily a negative thing. It's hard. I always try to feel like I should be qualifying these comments and qualifying these ideas with not trying to say anything's bad, but it is shocking when you realize how much stuff is compared to some other things. It is shocking. Like, it's a lot of money. It's a crazy amount of money, really. And if you genuinely actually enjoy it to that level, I always think about, like, in terms of golf clubs or something like that, or ski gear. Like, if you're buying the best ski gear, if you're genuinely using it to that level, that's great. Or if you're like a pro golfer and you need the pro golfing golf clubs to play at that level, then that's great. But I kind of see that as GW now. It's like a kind of pro golf level. It's like if you're putting those miniatures together and you're painting them at that level and you're playing at that level, then maybe potentially the cost is justified. But I do find it personally, and Vampz is the same too, like I find it quite hard to justify the cost when you compare it to other stuff. I mean, you mentioned like Mantic's Firefight there. It's a really good game, you know, and you mentioned Kings of War as well. Mantic's really good game, and you can get into it like $1,000 less. It's a pretty big difference. It's not just a 20%. It's like more than 200% difference. It's something that's worthy of note for sure, and it's something that I would say you need to know before you get involved in it, because at least if you get involved in it, you know that it's an informed choice and you know it's valid. But anyway, really good conversation. Really interesting conversation. I'm not going to talk about anything that I've been up to hobby-wise. I'll leave that till next week. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of round that off by talking about some more thoughts on the general content. And I'll leave it there. Until next time we're together, keep painting.